One thing I would say inviting laughter into your life is that, the Bible tells us the joy of the Lord is our strength.
Yes.
Realizing that finding joy, laughter, find the thing that amuses you, that makes you laugh. Find the person that you like to laugh with, because truly joy, it tells us, it is strength. It is good medicine.
When was the last time you laughed? And I mean one of those good old-fashioned belly laughs where you can't even catch your breath. If it's been a while, you're not alone. In fact, studies say that adults laugh less than 20 times a day. You compare that to children who laugh anywhere from 200 to 500 times a day. I hope to change that by introducing you to my special guest. Welcome back to the Juggling Life Finding Balance podcast. I'm your host, Vivian Cummins, and my guest today is Junebug Colson. She is an award-winning comedian, speaker, writer, and host of the Laugh Support podcast. June won the 2020 Nashville Clean Comedy Championship, and she's been recognized by the Gospel Comedy Association as 2022's Shining Light. Junebug has been a regular television warm-up comic. She's been featured on the Comedy Buzz and Dry Bar Comedy, which is the world's largest clean comedy platform. If you're feeling a little heavy lately, or maybe you're burned out, or maybe you just need some good old-fashioned fun, y'all are in for such a treat. This is one you don't want to miss. So let's get started. Hey, June, welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
Vivian, I'm just thrilled. I am so excited to get to be on your podcast. I've been listening to episodes for the last few days, and this is such a great podcast. So what an honor, blessing to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I am just so thrilled that you're here. And I've already done the introduction this morning, but I'm going to give you a minute to introduce yourself a little bit more too. But just for our listeners, I met Junebug at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. Did I say that right? NRB?
Sure.
I think I said that right. And that was my first year going. I don't know about you. Had you gone before?
No, I had not. So my podcast was nominated for one of their awards, and so it wasn't on my radar. So it was actually my first year of experiencing that huge. It's a huge conference.
It's so big. Oh my gosh. So I just got to know, I felt so overwhelmed the whole time I was there. There was so much to see, do, and so many people to talk to. I was just like overwhelmed, but I loved it. I loved it.
Same.
So we met at that conference, and I was just immediately drawn to you because there's just something about you that just, whoa, you got this light that shines on you. And when I found out that you're a comedian, I said, oh my gosh, I have to have her on the show, because part of my ministry is encouraging women to live balanced lives and helping them to find that balance in their life. And I believe that includes 3 pillars of placing God first, self-care, and then that third pillar is having fun. Because as adult women especially, we forget to have fun. We're so busy doing all the things for everybody else that we forget to have fun. And so I wanted to have you on today because you are one of the funnest people I've met. And I cannot wait to introduce you to our listeners and those watching. So without further ado, let's start with that fun stuff. I need to know, how did you get the name Junebug? And you got a story about someone named Hotdog and Mo. Give us those backstories.
That's right. Yeah. So my family is a family of nicknames. Everyone in the family has nicknames or aliases, as my dad refers to them. So I was born a bug-eyed baby with no hair. I was bald until middle school. And so my name is June Marie May. I was supposed to be May Marie June. I was supposed to be born in June. Yeah, and I showed up late. So Mom just flipped it and changed it to June Marie May. So it was the month that I was born in. And I had an aunt who really just gave nicknames to all the kids in the family. So I've been Junebug. I always say the people who know me the most and love me the most, call me Junebug, and it literally is like the name that God calls me. Like, I feel when the Holy Spirit talks to me, like, I get the gentle Junebug, and I get the
Yes.
Junebug, really
Mhm.
Junebug? Yeah,
Mhm.
so yeah, so that's my nickname. My little brother's nickname is Dewey. I have a sister named Bobby Joe. My mama went by Mo. My oldest, he called her Grandmo when he was little, and then he just dropped the Gram and called her Mo. Yeah. And so she just became Mo at, like, 62 years old, and she was thrilled to death that she finally got a nickname because everyone else has
Every
nicknames.
one,
And
yeah.
yeah, and then my dad is Hot Dog. Now, like, 30 years he's been Hot Dog, but before he was Hot Dog, he was Pudgy. Before he was Pudgy, he went by Fast Eddie. Um, and he's kind of he's a wild man. He's the subject of a lot of my comedy. My mom, my mom was, she passed away a couple of years ago, but my mom, her mother was bipolar, and my mom had a lot of bipolar tendencies. And she had a lot of, like, social issues. So, like, at church, there was a lot of prayer requests that was TMI, if you know what I mean. It's
Mhm, I
so
do, I do.
yeah, so we kinda dealt with mom's quirks with humor,
Yeah.
and then, my dad, I mean, they call him Hot Dog because he has lived a wild life, just really untethered, battled with alcoholism, just a lot of addiction. My dad's life has been riddled with that, but also just a really fun and funny person, So, yeah, so it fits. It just fits. People know him, his doctors call him Hot Dog, people who come to see my shows, if he comes, they wanna meet him, they don't care about meeting me, but yeah, that's my crazy family, and I know, like, you're in California, right?
I'm in California right now, yes,
Yeah,
but I'm
so,
from
I was
Oklahoma, so I'm like, "Yes, I'm hearing you."
so you might get the nicknames
I
then, because
do.
when I first started writing comedy, I was online writing with some people from LA, and one guy literally says to me, "Hot Dog, Mo, Bobby Joe, Junebug, Dewey, I don't know why you made up these names, but it's not realistic."
Oh, it's very realistic. Where we're from, yes. So here's is your dad's name Ed? Eddie? Edward?
Well, he's Richard Edward. All the men in my family were Richards,
Okay.
and they
They're
all went by
Richards.
a middle name. So he's been Richard, he's been Edward, he's been Eddie. He was Fast Eddie when he was a bartender.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, so that's, people called him that because they said, like, that he just knew everyone's drink in town and he would pour it before they could get to the stool. Like, that was, his claim to fame back in
Okay.
Indiana. Yeah.
So, yes. So, fun fact, when you said that, so my husband's Fast Eddie. And, his name he's Donald Edward, and, went by Eddie, and he raced, motocross, for a
Okay.
large part of his life, all through childhood and then even in adulthood, until he until he said, he had one really bad crash when he was in his 40s, and he's like, "Yeah, I got a mortgage, and I don't think I should be doing this anymore," and I'm like, "Praise the Lord." Because it's so funny because I've known my husband growing up all my whole life. I knew he was a racer,
Yeah.
but I always was like, "Yeah, that's so cool. He's a racer." But then when I married him, I'm like, "Oh, wait, that's not as cool anymore
Right.
because you can like he broke all kinds of bones all the time and stuff
Yeah.
like that." So anyway, so he's Fast Eddie and we all give each other names and stuff too. And so my grandma always called me Pumpkin. I was always Pumpkin. I don't know why. Um, and then my dad calls me sis, and my husband calls me cupcake. And I don't know why. Nobody knows why. It's like, okay, do I look like a cupcake? Is it 'cause I don't eat a lot of cupcakes? I like cupcakes, so it's just fun, and it's a back home thing. It's
I
a term
think
of
so.
endearment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I think it really is that, like, it's just an intimate name, and I think that's why the Holy Spirit calls me Junebug because it's just
Yes.
intimate, it's
It's
special, it's
intimate.
the
Mhm.
yeah, it's just the people who know you the best. So and my
Yes.
dad, by the way, was a race car driver as well. I grew up at the racetrack, not motocross, but he
Right, right,
drove,
right.
like, stock cars and, figure eight and the crash up derby and,
Sure
like,
enough.
yeah, we sat in the stands in Mount Lawn, a little raceway in Indiana, and then my uncle raced, my cousin still races in Indiana, so, yeah, there's a lot of grease monkeys in my
I
family.
love that. No wonder I love you so much. You feel like home to me. So fun, so fun. And then just one last thing on the terms of endearment that, so I'm now retired from the federal government, but when I first started, I had a really bad habit of calling people "hun" and "shug." And so you can't be calling people "hun" and "shug" or "baby" in the workplace. And so I got pulled aside one time by my supervisor and kind of was counseled, but not I didn't get in trouble because she knew my heart. She knew I was just being friendly and it meant I liked you if I called you by something. And she says, "Vivian, you can't do that. It's offensive. You're gonna get an EEO complaint." I'm like, "Okay." So I had to really like make a conscious effort not to call people terms of endearment and get myself written up.
I would so be in trouble, yeah, and it's
I
not even just that,
know.
like, I am a "Hey, hun, sugar babe" type of gal, but it's also because I can't remember your name,
True
and
that.
so, yeah,
True
that's part of
that.
the struggle as well, so I would be
Yes,
in
I'm
trouble all the time. I
yes.
don't think I would've lasted long in a government position, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh. Alright, hey, listen, I just need to know, so, were you always drawn to comedy, or was there, like, this time where you were like, "Hey, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do," or, I don't know, maybe this is the only thing left to do? What drew
Mm.
you to this career?
Oh gosh, I will say that, comedy has always been something entertainment-wise that I've been drawn to because, growing up with a dad named Hotdog, he did not make good life decisions, nor did he make good financial decisions. So I grew up in, like, low-income housing, government housing. We were evicted from homes, cars repoed. One of my first jobs was, I was 12 or 13 years old, and I was cleaning the bathrooms at a bar that was a block from my house. We lived at the split in a road on one of the busiest roads in the town that we moved to in Kentucky, and the only thing on the street was this broken down apartment we were in, a gentleman's club, and 2 bars. And so, having a mom who had a lot of odd social behavior, a dad who was an addict, and living where we lived in a school bus coming to pick us up, as well as, we shared clothes. My brother, my sister, and I would share clothes. So, like Monday, my brother would be wearing a pair of jeans, and Tuesday, I would wear the jeans with a belt wrapped around me and a big sweater on. And so, things were not easy when I was growing up, and so I really wasn't a fan of watching drama or, scary things or anything like that. There was enough scary things in my life, right? So I just wanted comedy. I just wanted to laugh. So I watched I watch a lot of Saturday Night Live and Living Color, Mad TV. I love the sketch shows because it just felt like grown-ups playing like kids, they escaped, they did characters. And so, yeah, I was just drawn to, like, comedic characters. I would watch, the stand-up comedy shows and the Apollo, all of those things growing up, and nothing was off limits. I didn't live in a home that, I mean, God wasn't the center of our household. It was a party home and, a lot of just rough characters coming in and out, and so I wasn't really drawn to clean comedy. Uh, but it was an escape for me. And then many years later, as an adult in my 40s, I was sitting at church and the Holy Spirit was like, "Hey, I've got something I want you to do." And literally all he told me, Vivian, was he just said, "I want you to write." And, it was one of those moments, like, it struck me. It was so, like, physically washed over me. Before church started, there was no music, there was no, nothing dramatic happening. I was just sitting down in my pew because 'cause I'm a Baptist and we have our own pews, um, but I just sat down and I felt the Holy Spirit say, "I want you to write." And it shook me. It just really shook me. And so for about a year, I just prayed about it. I'm like, because 'cause I'd written my whole life. I had written poetry and, lyrics and journaled. So I'm like, "I have been writing. What do you want me to write?" And then the Holy Spirit revealed that it was comedy. And he's like, "It's always been comedy, June." Because, the most dysfunctional families, I think, can be the funniest. And, my dad made a comment one time, and he said, "We've always smoothed out the rough spots with comedy." And so, I think because he was funny, and I would see, like, because of my mom's, personality, humor would diffuse her anger when she would go into, a fit. If you could get her to laugh, it would calm the room. So I just kinda learned that skill set to protect myself, and then also, you know, it was an escape. So, yeah, I feel like I have always been drawn to comedy, yeah.
Sure, you just didn't maybe know it was gonna be your livelihood at some point.
Not at all. Not that really felt like it came out of left field, but then the more I did the journey with God, the more I saw, looking back, how he was really building all of these experiences and different skill sets even from I worked in radio for several years, I did photography, so I was able to take my own headshots when I got started. It was like he didn't waste
Yeah,
anything.
I
Even
love
the
it.
drama and the tragedies and the things that I've journeyed through, I've been able to find the humor and look for the funny in it, and so even the broken places haven't been wasted, if that makes sense.
It does, and so you say that you use your experiences, your family, where you grew up as some of your material. Growing up where I grew up back home in Oklahoma, there's some similarities to some of the stories that I've heard you tell. I too lived by a bar. It's called the Wandora. And matter of fact, here's another little fun fact. If you watch Twisters, the second one, not Twisters 1, but Twisters 2, it's filmed in Oklahoma. It was actually that there's a scene that it was filmed on the street that both my husband and I grew up on
Really?
for a
Wow.
short period of time. And this bar is called Wandora, and it pans, and we see it in the actual screenshot. And so when we were at the movies, we were like, "Oh my gosh, there's home!" The Wandora, and it's an old bar, and I lived there too. And right around the next to the bar was a laundromat and a corner market. I don't know if you remember that. Back in the day, there were like little markets
Yeah.
within neighborhoods for the housewives to go get their bread and things that they needed or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would go there with my mom. We'd have to walk by this bar, the Wandora, and the doors were always open. I don't know if they had air conditioning or not, but the doors were always open, and I just remember being terrified because there were men in there. There were men, and they were drinking, and they were smoking, and I just knew that that was bad or something, and
Yeah.
so it's just funny, but anyways, back to my question, I digress, but, I does your family, like, ever, like, cringe and be like, "Oh my gosh, what is she gonna say about me?" Is it ever feeling like it's an offense to bring up some of these things? Is it funny or is it making fun? You tell me.
Yeah. It's Charlie Chaplin, I think. It's one of my favorite comedy quotes. He says, "Let my pain be the reason for somebody's laughter, but never let my laughter be the reason for someone's pain."
Oh, that's good.
And so
Mhm,
writing
mhm.
comedy when it comes to my family and the experiences, generally, I run stuff by them. There's nothing that I say about my husband that my husband doesn't know I'm going to say, or I know 100% it's not gonna offend him. Um, I had a mentor early on that was like, above all things, protect your marriage and your family. And so, at the time, my husband was the fire chief of the 3rd largest city in the state of Kentucky when God called me to do this. So I really struggled. I was like, first of all, I was like, Christian comedy, like, they're not, I can't tell the stories of my life to Christians. Like, they're going to clutch their pearls and feel some kind of way about my family. And I'll tell you, on occasion, I've had that experience where I'm telling a story and you get, oh, she was poor, or, oh, I mean, it's just
Bless her little heart.
yeah, bless her heart, the more diverse an audience is, the better. I feel like my comedy goes over, and I understand I had to learn that, like, what I do is not for everybody, but it is for somebody, or God wouldn't have called me into this. And generally, he'll show me, the person in the room that's for that. But the way that I write, I try to always make sure I end up being the butt of the joke. I don't go into super dark things that even like I do a bit called 23 and Me, because like 5 years ago, we discovered a sister in Indiana. That, and the reality is dad's name is Hotdog, and he is, I mean, he's lived a wild life, and
Sure
I'm
enough.
pretty aware he wasn't faithful to mom and all of those things. And so suddenly this person reaches out and is like, I think your dad is my dad. And we went through this journey together. Well, now I do a bit about it. But before I did, I ran it past my little sister and made sure, and then I got to do it in front of her and, at a pretty big show in Indianapolis. And I think a lot of times it just makes them feel special and part of the story. But it is different. It is, it is kind of odd. And I try to make sure that I am respectful to, the people around me. And again, it's like you just have to read the room that you're in. You have to be mindful of the person you're telling the story about. I change up some details, so that it comes back on me, and I never try to make a family member look foolish. Usually they're the punchline in the smart end of the joke,
Sure.
and I become the butt of the joke.
Yes. So you talked about Christian comedy, and that's obviously what you do, clean Christian comedy. A lot of people think that it can't be funny.
Yeah.
Oh, how can you be funny if it's clean and you're not cursing and you're not talking dirty or stuff? But you have totally proven otherwise. Like you had said earlier, you listened to some of my podcasts. Well, I've listened to a lot of your stand up shows, and you are so darn funny. So, how do you use that humor to reach those people, to reach the hearts? And how has that become your ministry, if you will?
Mm. Yeah, I say I call myself even in the Christian comedy world, people are like, "Are you a Christian who's a comedian, or are you a Christian comedian?" And, some people don't refer to themselves as Christian comedians because they don't wanna turn on people in the secular world and put a wall up that maybe they can't reach them with their comedy. I always say I call myself a Christian comedian because that's what God called me. And, however, I don't do a ton of Christian material. I do 100% clean. I do, there's a difference between club clean and Christian clean. A lot of times in the clubs, it's just kind of if you don't say a cuss word, you can use innuendos, just don't say the word. So sometimes clean comedians think, oh, I can go do a church show. And they can't because they don't understand the culture and they don't know where the line is. Um, but for me, I actually get hired for shows because I don't do a ton of church culture jokes. I just do like, this is crazy life. We're not perfect, but I've been evicted. I've been poor. My dad, we got the 23 and Me sister. Like, my mom is goofy. Like, it's just to kind of bring people in. And I mention God a few times in my comedy, but I don't necessarily do like Noah's Ark jokes and, those type of things. And I'll get hired sometimes by churches because it's an outreach. It's to get people to come in. It's to see that you can laugh and you don't have to have the crude cuss words and that kind of thing. I don't speak over their head and tell stories that they don't know the culture of yet, that they don't get, and it just opens that door to bring people in and go, "Oh, it's okay." And I will tell you, as a clean comedian, one of the top comedians in the world right now is out of Nashville, Tennessee. His name is Nate Bargatze. Um,
Yep.
I've
Yep.
had the
Love
pleasure of
him.
working with his dad, Steven, a few times, and I call him friend. Um, Nate's Nate's 100% clean,
And he's
and he's selling
hilarious.
out Bridgestone Arena in Nashville.
Yes.
But listen, you don't get to lean on a cuss word. You
Mhm.
don't get to be lazy. You don't get to just throw stuff out there if you're going to really be good at your craft. We have to work so much harder to be funny because we can't do the lazy jokes. We have to work really hard. So then when you do see someone like Nate, it's undeniable that clean comedy is funny, and I get to work with a ton of Christian comedians and clean comics all over the country that prove that every day. And what I think is the best compliment is when someone leaves and then suddenly they go, "Oh, wait, they never said a cuss word." But I don't go in a space judgmental or talk over the head of the people that's around me. A church can bring me in and it's safe because I understand that, where I'm at and who I'm speaking to. But then I can also, God can use me in other venues because people don't feel as judged, I think. And I struggled with Christians and Christianity for a long time because where I grew up, as I said, mom in church, I saw people laugh at her. She was different and she didn't fit in and she wasn't part of the cliques and, those kind of things. I know what that feels like. I know that kind of hurts. So when somebody's like, well, I haven't been to church, I'm not offended. I don't beat people over the head with a Bible. I just try to do my best to be funny and then let them know why I have joy.
Yes, I love that so, so much, and that is the ministry, right? It's reaching people, it's being authentic, and it's reaching people where they're at, and God shines through that, and that's your ministry. I think that is absolutely beautiful. I love it. We talked a little bit about, your using your personal life for your comedy, and that makes your comedy so personal. So I can imagine any type of critique that you might get could be
Mm.
very tough. So how have you learned to like receive any feedback, or have you ever had those times where you didn't get the laughs that you had hoped for? How has that affected you?
Oh, friend, in our industry, they call it bombing
Oh,
or dying when it
goodness
doesn't.
gracious.
Yes, that's how, like, it's like, "Oh, man, I bombed last night. Oh, I died
Oh,
up
that's
there."
so negative.
And if you do well, you killed. She
Well, that
killed.
well, goodness gracious.
Yes.
Very violent.
That's how tough this industry is. And
Yeah.
when I tell you comedians quit their jobs more than anybody else, I mean, there's no
Oh, I
scientific
bet.
study, but I've been around comedians, like, every other week, I have someone message me and go, "I'm done.
I'm
That's it.
done.
I
That's
can't."
it. Mhm.
And sometimes it is your fault. You didn't come prepared. You
Yeah.
chose, to do a show that you shouldn't have been at, or you didn't pray about it and you put yourself in that position. They always say don't blame the audience, but sometimes I've been in a position where it was like everything was set up in a way that there was no way for us to be, successful in that room. And I just have to learn. But He's shown me crazy times. There was one show that I really stewed over for a while where I'm like, I don't get it. What happened? And it was like 2.5 weeks later, I had a woman message me and said, "Hey, I just wanted to reach out and let you know that I just truly think you're doing what God called you to do. And my husband and I are in a really dark place. And we were sitting in our car, and after a lot of tears and, whatever, we're like, we've got to go somewhere. And I happen to be performing at a 100% clean comedy club." And they came to the club, they sat front row. I ended up kinda having a back and forth with them because no one else in the room was even remotely
Engaging or
in.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and then, but I was like, "Gosh, I should have been better. I should have given more. What went wrong?" And then 2.5 weeks later, someone tells me how desperately they needed to be in that space. So sometimes I have to give myself grace. When I'm writing, I had a great, mentor. His name is Rick Roberts, and he's taught so many of the Christian comedians how to write. But I remember him saying, "You've gotta treat your material like a frog and not a baby," right? And you gotta be willing to dissect it, make it better, put it back together, so when you hand it over to another writer and you're critiquing each other or whatever, if I hand you my baby, Vivian, and you go, "What a ugly baby," your baby's stupid.
Oh my gosh. That's devastating. It's my
But
baby.
but if I handed you a frog and told you you could pull it apart and you're like, "Yeah, that leg shouldn't be there, and let's
Yeah.
move the ear around," it's different. You can you can accept that, and you can hand somebody something if you don't hold it so close to your
That's so
heart.
true.
And so, yeah,
Mhm.
it can be tough, and then to have people that you trust is huge. I have a great support system, um, with female comedians. Literally just yesterday, we were talking about an email someone received after a show. And when I tell you there's over 1,000 people at the show, and one person chose to reach out and lash out about a specific topic, and, we had to go, that's sometimes it's a them thing, and it's not a you thing, and you just have to go, "Okay, God, like, I just give that person into your hands." But yeah, it's brutal. I definitely have many days where I drove back home and went, "I'm not funny at all. Why what is this about, God? Like, really? This is what you called me to do?" But, I mean, you just have to trust him.
You do, and Satan is such a liar, and he's just he likes to put those little seeds of doubt in the back of our minds, but I also heard you say on another podcast one time, and I say this exact same thing. Actually, I say it now, but it was said to me by, actually the producer that does our podcast. You said, "If it's just for the one." You're doing this for the one. So regardless if you didn't reach anybody else in that audience but that one lady or that one couple, then you obeyed and God is happy with that. And so the gentleman that produces this podcast for us, he said that to me as well because, when you get started, and you have a podcast too that we'll talk about in a moment, but when you get started, it's not easy to do a podcast. I mean, there's so many behind the scenes things that you have to do and to even get it to where we're at today. And so when your growth doesn't happen like you want it to, and you see other people that have all these, hundreds of thousands of subscribers and yours is slow rolling and you're like, but I'm a Christian. You know what I mean? Hey, Lord, I'm doing this to build your kingdom. Why is this secular person over here? Their stuff's blowing up and stuff. But he brought me back. He said, Vivian, he's like, are you doing this for subscribes? Are you doing this to help build the kingdom? And you have to trust that God is placing the people in this path of who's listening, watching, or whatever that needs to hear it. And if it's just one person, you have to be okay with just that one. And he asked me, are you okay with just one? And I'm like, oh, and I said, let me get back to you. I need a minute. I need a minute. But I'm just like, okay, Lord, if I don't grow anymore than the number that I have today, then I trust you because you've got a plan and this is not about me, it's about you. Right? So
Yes.
it's gosh, that's humbling, huh? Ugh.
Yeah, for sure. And we are in an industry where it's all about, I mean, I had a really hard time because I have a great support group, but I also have some friends who are just powerhouse on social media. And they're like, you have to post this many times a day and you have to do this and that. And they have all these followers. And finally, like, I just started getting discouraged after a few weeks. And I was like, okay, God, I'm just gonna, what do you call success? What do you say is successful? And it was that conversation of the just one. He's like, "I left the 99 for one, right? I sent my one and only son for you. You, just you, right? And then her, right?" But he said, there's if I put you in that room, there will always be one in that room, and maybe the one is just you. Maybe today you just need to have a humbling experience, June. But the first time I did, like, a cancer center, got to do, like, a free show, I was so excited about it. But all these folks are, like, on heavy medications, they're feeding them fried chicken, nobody's really listening to you, it's really more for the family members, that were there with the patients, and, I used to open up with, like, "My name is June, I have a pretty obvious nickname," and this lady in the center of the room went, "Junebug," like, really quickly. And I go, "Oh, do you know a June bug?" And she goes, "I am a June bug."
Oh, oh,
And
that's
that's
sweet.
happened more than once that a June was in the room. A June came to
Yes.
me, and in that room, it was just really hard, and I did my material, and I just kinda hung out with them. But God, sometimes I have no idea who the person was in the room, and
That's
then
right.
other times, God is just really sweet, and he goes, "Here's a June." And she was in the center of the
Oh, boy.
room.
Yeah.
But that one person it is worth it. That one
Yeah.
person is worth it, and it just becomes you just have to humble yourself and go, "Okay, God, even if it was just if this is just for me and you today, I said yes, and that's success."
That is yeah, absolutely, and I found that, at least in my experience so far, that when I write a blog post or I write for YouVersion app as well, or I do something like that, um, and I'm like, God, I'm not getting the feedback I'd like to get. Did I hear you wrong? Should I not have written that?" And then lo and behold, I'll get an email, just like you mentioned, from somebody that said, "I just came across your YouVersion, Bible study thing, and I'm in a place, it just touched my heart," and then I'm like, "Okay, God." So he gives me those little God winks every now and again when I start feeling like, "Did I miss him? Did I get it wrong?" And then he'll just go, "Dink," and I'm like, "Okay, keep going," and that's all I need to keep the encouragement up. But,
I will say a pet
yeah.
peeve for me in comedy is when you go into a room and, like, maybe the comedian thought there was gonna be 200 people at the show and 20 show up or 25. I never mention, like, the empty room. I never mention the empty seats, and some comedians cannot help themselves, and they'll make 5 jokes about, like, nobody's there and this and that and whatever, and I think, when you do that, when you write the blog post, when you do the podcast, whatever, I always think, like, whoever those 10 people are, especially at a comedy show, they took the time, they paid the money. I'm gonna perform for them, no d actually, probably more intimately and maybe have a little more fun because it's just us, friends talking, it's less of a performance, and it gets to be more of a conversation, but I never wanna dismiss if I look at my podcast and only, 50 people watched it, I shouldn't be only 50. I should be like, "Wow, 50 people, whatever this message was, there were 50 people that got to hear it this week, and I never wanna dismiss the people in the room and focus on the empty seats or the lack of clicks or the lack of, email responses. It feels good when you get that, but at the same time, if that's what we're doing it for, we're always gonna be left empty. You'll always
That's
feel
right.
empty.
You'll never have enough. There'll never be enough.
Yeah.
And a lot of the industries, and as a writer myself, I'm about to pitch my first book, and some of the feedbacks that I'm hearing is, "We'd like to see those social media numbers go up." And I'm like,
Right.
"Really?
Mhm.
Alright," and so
Yeah.
you get so and so I kinda had a conversation with God, a couple weeks ago. I'm like, "Hey, Lord, I'm hearing that I gotta get these numbers up, but the doors aren't opening to get these numbers up," and I just really felt in my spirit, said, "Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. This is my book. I want this to get published. It's gonna get published regardless whether you have, 50,000 on your Instagram or not." So I just sat back and said, "Okay." So I'm just gonna plow forward and not worry about that because he's in control of it. He's got us.
Yeah.
He's
He
got
does.
us. He's got us. Okay. So we are in such a world where we are rewarded by compromise a lot. I see it all around, especially in comedy. So how do you stay true to your convictions and you keep your comedy clean and Christ focused? How do you do that? Is there ever that temptation to want to maybe push the envelope a little bit or
Well, given my upbringing, I have a few female comedian friends that were always like, if I didn't do clean comedy, I'd have a whole hour set about my dad, right? I full on could do a whole, the world would embrace some of the stuff that I could do. But I really believe it's God waited until he had my heart before he called me into this arena because when I was 17 and living next door to the gentleman's club and surrounded by addicts and alcoholics and the party and the literally just growing up thinking that the only value I had was that I was a girl and that I had long hair and there was always inappropriate men around and that was the jokes and the attention and those were the girls, and I think like that was not a time that guy because when he called me at like 40, I was like, they're 20-year-old girls doing this that are hustling, not people, not 40-year-old moms, they don't wanna hear from their mother, up there, but he waited until I'm growing every day, every year in my relationship with Christ, but he protected me from the industry until I was ready, until I really wanted to do it to honor him. I'll make mistakes, but I surround myself with people that I trust that will call me out, I don't do anything like when people hire me, they feel safe. Other comics will be like, "Oh, no, she's squeaky clean," she's squeaky clean. However, there's been a few times where I've said something or worded something in a way that, like, my husband's like, "Do you wanna say it like that?" Or, "Do you really wanna do that joke?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, you're right." And I'm like, "Oh, it's so
It
funny,
would have
you
been, yeah,
know?"
everyone would have laughed.
Yeah, but I really do have to, like, I really just feel a strong conviction to honor him because I'm like, I can't tell these kind of jokes and then expect people to take me seriously about my faith in Christ. I don't look any different than the world. He didn't call me into it to draw people to me. It was to draw people to him. And I know that, so do I always get it right? Probably not. But it's truly about just having good mentors, really good friends and family members who I know would call me out if I went the wrong direction. And honest, just I wanted to draw people to him and not me. So for me, it's not really hard. That's not, but I didn't. There are some Christian comedians that actually started out as secular comedians who have, really dark testimonies and all of this stuff, and they had to redo all of their material. And now, they're trying to honor God and figure out how to rework it. I say I didn't start out as a clean comedian either. I used that comedy to protect myself. I had a lot of just really dark and, dirty jokes for if the guy on the bus was gonna make fun of me for wearing my brother's clothes, if someone wanted to say something about because literally there would be homeless people at the end of the driveway when we would get on the bus, or there may be a girl from the club walking down the street with a man in front of my home. So I had to there wasn't clean little cute jokes that you could do in high school and middle school to protect yourself. Um, so I said I didn't necessarily start out clean, but God didn't call me until my heart was
Till
his.
you were ready,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so the
Yeah.
compromise is not really it's not that hard for me.
I love that. I like what you said about, he was protecting you. I'm kind of the same way. God called me to write a book and to do some of this media
Mhm.
stuff in my 50s. Well, it was
Yeah,
in my late 40s.
yeah,
And I remember, talking to God about it and being like, "Hey, 50's kind of old. Like, I'm not gonna have very many years to do this, Lord. Seriously? You gonna call me now? Like, shouldn't you have done it way back then?" But I mean, there's over the last 5, 6 years, God has had to refine me. Holy smokes. I mean,
yeah,
I needed to be humbled and like you said, I think it was a protection, for me, and I think it was a protecting his reputation as well, because if I'd have gone
true.
out writing or talking about the things that I probably would not be kingdom building at all at this point because I had a lot of work to do. So I like that, that you recognize that it was a protection. And, I kinda look at it protecting me and him
Yeah,
for
no,
me
for
anyways,
sure.
definitely. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we talk about is because you don't only write, well, first of all, you have a book coming out in December 25. Can you talk to us about that yet, or is that off limits?
No, for sure,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of a wild journey, so, as I said, there was about a year there that I was like, "Okay, God, what do you want me to do?" And all he had said was, "Write," so I just sat down and I just started writing stories, childhood stories. I grew up in Indiana, and then we moved to Kentucky when I was 10 years old. So I'm part Indiana Hoosier and I'm part Kentucky hillbilly. So I call myself a hoobilly. That's what my papa Dickie would call me. He would call our side of the family the hoobillies. And so I've written a book. The working title is Memoirs of a Hoobilly. And yeah, it's basically kind of the journey of like, I lived in a little town that was like Mayberry. It was population 700 people. Um, but all the dysfunction between, mom's mental health and dad's addictions and just a lot of drama in our life and then moving to Kentucky and losing the only support system that my brother and my sister and I had, to live in the neighborhoods we lived in and just kind of to, feel like we're just kind of left out there to take care of each other. Um, I just started writing all of those stories, and I know it doesn't sound very funny, but there's some like, I find humor in all of it. My brother and I got shot at by a homeless guy whose last name was Rich. Um Yes. I ran away for
Ironic.
3 days and my parents didn't know I was gone. Like,
Oh my
everyone
goodness.
yeah, and it sounds like when I said some people clutch their pearls,
They're like, "Oh my
and
gosh."
other people can follow along and find the humor because you really
Yeah.
can find humor in just about anything if you look really hard and you try. There's a guy in master class, I can't remember what his name is, but I remember him saying, "I feel sorry for people who aren't writers or at least comedy writers." Because when a bad thing happens to other people, they just find it as a bad thing. But later, comedians make it into a really funny story. And so that's kind of what this book is. It's just some of the difficulties that I had and feeling like God didn't hear me, and finally really realizing that he was on the journey with me the whole
All the
time. So,
time.
yeah,
Yep.
so it's just silly, fun, what I think is fun stories of my hoobilly family, and, the goal is to have it out before Christmas, so
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome. What a great little Christmas gift for people. I love that. Oh, thank you for sharing that with I didn't know sometimes people can't talk about their upcoming books until a certain time. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
And you're also a co-host on a podcast, and your co-host, I met her at NRB as well, Michelle
yeah,
Van Dusen. I think that's how
yes,
you say her last name.
yeah,
And y'all's podcast is called Laugh Support. Tell
yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah, laugh support. So we have a friend, named Joel Byers, and he's been podcasting, doing comedy podcasting for a really long time. And he reached out to us one day and said, "Hey, I'd love to have a clean comedy podcast on the platform." And he was like, I feel like you guys, your just dynamic as friends is really great. And would you consider putting something together?" And neither one of us have any tech skill at all. And we were both like, well, I guess. And so as we talked, I said, I don't want it to just be a podcast like all the other comedy podcasts where they just talk about comedy or like how you got into comedy, but like you know, I want it to be something a little deeper than that. And so we ended up going with laugh support, like life support, because Michelle was my support when I first started doing comedy. She had been doing comedy several years before I came onto the scene. She was there the first time I went on stage, and she supported me since day one. And so what we do is we talk to other comedians. 90%, I would say, of our podcast has a guest, and we talk about their journey and who was there for you. And it's really people get really emotional because they start thinking back to the first time they went on stage and who showed up or who didn't. Sometimes these comics are like, it was just me and God, like no one was there. And but they get to say some thank yous and really revisit and understand that like this journey they weren't alone. And really just say thanks to family members and friends and tell some really funny stories about bombing or dying on stage. And it's been a pleasure. And then we do some panels where we, talk about technically stuff or we just talk about our lives and how comedy intersects in the juggle that we go through as moms and wives and traveling. And so yeah, so it's laugh support.
So, what advice do you have to women who might be feeling that same way? Like, I haven't laughed in so long. How can we invite more joy and laughter into our lives?
Mm, yeah, I think, I mean, you're definitely onto something. I feel like for me, the amount of laughter that I have is a real measuring stick for just my mental health. The more I'm laughing, the more healthy I feel, and it's also the relationships that I have. Like you said, you ask your husband, "When was the last time we laughed together?" I'll be married 30 years in October, and I can tell you when the laughter stopped, it was, there's several times in our marriage that the laughter stopped, and it was a real indication of the danger zone that we were in and just the health of our marriage. One thing I would say inviting laughter into your life is that, the Bible tells us the joy of the Lord is our strength.
Yes.
Realizing that finding joy, laughter, find the thing that amuses you, that makes you laugh. Find the person that you like to laugh with, because truly joy, it tells us, it is strength. It is good medicine. Obviously, I would say, find a clean comedy show, find a Christian, comedy show, watch some things that aren't super serious on television. I mean, you can turn on the TV and find all the sins, right? You can find
Yes, you
murder and,
can.
adultery and we
Uh,
entertain ourselves with
yep.
that.
Yep.
And I say, step away from those things. Watch things that make you laugh. Listen to things that make you laugh and spend time with people who make you laugh, and to really check yourself and go, how am I? If you're taking yourself super seriously all the time, and life around you serious all the time, to me, it's almost walking in that spirit of offense, and just checking yourself and going, am I walking in a spirit of offense, or am I truly allowing the joy of Christ to be in my life? Because it tells us, it tells us it is good medicine. And so trust that. Trust that that's a thing that God wants us to do. And again, like I said, just just really kind of examine, like, what makes me laugh? What do be goofy. Let your little child, the people I have the most fun with, I have a niece named Brooklyn, and I can act like a complete goober with her. I mean, we 100% are so silly, and you almost feel like you did when you were a kid on the playground with your best friend, and you could just, put on the show and sing the song and be free. Allow yourself a little free time to just let
I
loose
love
and
it.
laugh.
That is absolute perfect advice. Thank you so much for that. Hey, Junebug, where can folks who are listening and watching, how can they catch your next show, previous shows, listen to your podcast, get your book, all the things?
Yeah, well, if you just social media, almost all my social media is Junebug Comedy. So you can find me Junebug Comedy on TikTok and Instagram. And Instagram is probably where I update the most of my show schedules and where I'm at. So just, if they follow me on social media, and then my website is junebugcomedy.com. I do have ADHD and I struggle with being organized, though I do my best to keep it up dated.
I can
But
help you with
yeah,
that. Oh, I gotta have things organized.
yeah, I wish I was. I'm
Ugh,
so yeah, I'm so not together. But also I think sometimes God's like, just look at Junebug and then be grateful that you're not that crazy. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I'm here for. So yeah, just follow me at Junebug Comedy. That'd be awesome.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes. And those of you who are listening and watching, make sure you go check her out. She is hilarious. And I have so enjoyed getting to know you better. And I look forward to seeing what God's going to do with your ministry and your comedy. And thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Juggling Life Finding Balance podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If so, give us some love by giving us a 5-star review and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And hey, I have a free gift for you. Head on over to my website, viviancummins.com, and grab your free resource today. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, be blessed and stay balanced.